Hi, my name is Usman. I'm a photographer at Sonder Creative, and today I'm going to be comparing Sony's IBIS or in-body image stabilization versus Canon's Lens IS. Now both of these systems have been put in place to help prevent motion blur for your images and help you get more stable footage for your video. Now Canon has come out and said that they believe that lens image stabilization is the best way forward because the image stabilization has been made specifically for the lens, and for that reason they've opted not to offer any camera body so far with IBIS technology. So in this video we're going to be comparing both of them to find out which one is actually better. So for the first comparison I use the Sony 28mm f2 on the a7R III versus the 24mm f2.8 IS on the Canon 5DSR. Now taking a bunch of pictures at relatively slow shutter speeds with both systems, I couldn't find any major difference between both of them. Now these are wide angle lenses, and in general because they're wide angle lenses and quite small and light, I'm not going to expect a lot of motion blur when I'm taking a bunch of pictures with them. So for these smaller wide angle lenses, I'd say they're both neck and neck in terms of performance. Now when it comes to video, I did do some mock vlogging tests between both of these lenses. However, this time I used the Canon 5D Mark IV, and what I found is both of these systems work at a very similar rate. In terms of performance, the differences are negligible. Now of course you're not going to get gimbal-like results between both of these systems, but what they do is they remove a lot of those micro vibrations, which is great because I find them to be quite troublesome to remove in post, especially if you're trying to stabilize the footage. Now for the next test, I did get a chance to take some portraits of a friend, Darlene. We went into Leeds and we were shooting in relatively low light scenarios, so instead of pushing the ISO, we brought this shutter speed down, so we were shooting at relatively slow shutter speeds at about 1/13 of a second. Now the portrait lenses that we used were the 85mm f1.4 IS from Canon, which is their latest 85mm lens, versus the Zeiss Batiste 85mm on the a7R III. Now the Zeiss does have its own optical stabilization in, but I found that the optical stabilization in the lens is relatively weak. It's not as good as some other lenses that I've used. However, when you put them together, the results were very good. After taking a bunch of shots with the a7R III and the Batiste, I was getting a hit rate of about 75 to 80% in terms of sharp images, which is very good, and this is again at 1/13 of a second at f1.8. With the Canon using the same settings, 1/13 f1.8, I was getting about 70 to 75% in terms of hit rate. So again, I'm gonna say that they're pretty negligible in terms of difference. Yes, the Sony does win by a slight amount, however that could come down to user error, and of course people move. I was shooting a model and people aren't going to be perfectly still, so I'm going to say that they're both about the same in terms of performance. And for the final test I used the macro lens, the 100mm macro from Canon to be precise. Unfortunately I don't own the 90mm macro from Sony, so this might be a relatively unfair comparison to Sony purely because I'm using it with a Metabones adapter. But even with that, when I was filming really up close, switching on the IS on the Canon looked about the same as switching on IBIS on the Sony. The differences are once again negligible. They both operate at a very similar level, and shooting pictures after taking a bunch of pictures at 1/20th of a second with IS and IBIS switched on respectively, again, the differences were very close. Now you may notice some motion blur in pretty much all of the images, and the reason for that is because I'm using a relatively long lens and I'm very close to the subject. However, in any case, both of these systems, IS and IBIS, work at about the same rate. When I was shooting on the Sony, I was obviously switching IS on the lens off and only using IBIS on the actual camera. When IS is switched on, Sony switches off steady shot, so you can only use one or the other, and between the two they both work at about the same rate. So what does this mean? Both of them work at the same rate, so obviously there's no winner, right? Wrong. Remember, Canon's whole argument was that they think that IS is a better option, and that's why they don't want to implement IBIS in any of their cameras. So because of that, because they both work at the same rate, Canon is wrong. Theirs isn't better. They both work at about the same rate, meaning Sony wins. And the reason why Sony wins is because IBIS technology works on every lens that you attach to it, even if it's an adapted lens, whereas IS technology obviously only works in the lenses that have IS. And this is the fantastic thing about Sony cameras and any camera which has IBIS technology, and that is that any lens that you adapt on it will be stabilized. All your prime lenses are stabilized, meaning that you can make potentially better lenses, and it's potentially cheaper to have lenses or manufacture lenses without the addition of IS. I really do hope that Canon implements a proper IBIS technology system or something along them lines in their mirrorless system, and not operate with their digital stabilization that they have in some of their mirrorless cameras that they currently produce. I think the IBIS technology is obviously the better option, and Canon really does need to start moving in that direction. Honestly, I was actually a little bit biased coming into this video because I kind of wanted IS to win. I don't know why, maybe it's just that inner Canon fanboy in me, but I really did want IS to win. However, results are results. Both of them work at a very similar rate, and on that basis Sony does win. Now, it is important to note the fact that this is only specific to the A7R III. The A7R III, as far as I'm aware, is the only Sony camera that has currently been rated at 5.5 stops. If you're using the A7 III or the A7R II or the A7 II, then the results may vary, because I don't think they're rated up to the same level as the A7R III. However, in any case, this does show that the technology available for IBIS technology is up to that level where it can perform as well as the best and latest lenses from Canon which have IS. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them below. Hit the like button, please subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you.